Yo guys, what is going on? And welcome back to another video on the channel. This week we're going to be going through everything to do with Game Week 28. Looking at some of the talking points ahead of the game week, things you need to know, talking about captaincy, some of the best forwards to buy for this week and beyond, and also a couple of differential picks for those people that are on free hit 29 or just on a punt for this week. So let's just get straight into it. Hopefully you guys like the graphics. They're a little bit more improved from last video. I actually put something together now, but I'm going to keep working on them and I'll invest in all that sort of stuff, and hopefully that will continue to get better with the videos as they come. But yeah, let's just hop straight into this one. So just going through some of the talking points ahead of this game week. And the first one being rolling a transfer. I think for me, this is probably, for most people, what we want to do this week. Not least because of blank game week 29, but just navigating the future in general. I think this is one of those game weeks where we've got a lot of injuries, and we're not necessarily sure on a lot of outcomes in the future in terms of how the FA Cup fixtures are going to affect blanks and doubles, and things like that. And I know that we have injuries, but I think in a lot of cases, those injuries can be moved to the bench, and hopefully you guys have got bench cover for a lot of these players. If you can just get through this week, especially if you're not free hitting 29, then I think the transfers can be made next week. And in some cases, those transfers can be rolled and might even help you delay your wildcard even further. But for me, for example, and I think for a lot of people, we're going to have Liverpool players. So Trent, Salah, some people might have an extra defender, Konate, Van Dijk, Alisson, and also Palace players and stuff like that. I just think if you can, you want to keep those guys this week, right? Like, they've got really good fixtures and you don't want to transfer them out. So what's likely going to happen is next week's going to roll around. You've then got transfers that you might want to make to Trent. He's probably going to be the most popular one. And maybe even Salah. And what that's going to do is that's going to free up a lot of money for 29. And it's going to mean that you can invest that money better next week. So if you were to make a transfer this week, you're obviously not going to transfer those players out. So let's say you're selling like a Cunha or a Mateta or whatever. You're then only going to have a certain amount of money to reinvest that in another forward. So in most cases, I think, try and hold that off for next week. But obviously it's going to be team dependent. But that's going to be what I'm going to try and do, I think. Obviously depending on press conferences and stuff like that. This is being recorded after the second round of Champions League games. So I haven't heard from any managers going into the deadline yet. I'll update you guys if I hear anything. Chip usage, I just wanted to talk about it briefly because there's been a lot of sort of chatter in the community about what to do with your chips if you still have them. And I think for me, unless you're 100% going to free hit next week because you've got loads of Palace, Newcastle, Liverpool, whatever, or it's just what you've committed to, I think just try and forget about them a little bit. Obviously, you want to try and plan ahead as much as possible. But if you're trying to make transfers this week, based on like potential scenarios that could happen with blanks and doubles and therefore would affect your chips, I feel like you're just setting yourself up for trouble, because obviously football is an unpredictable game. Like, let's say FA Cup fixtures don't go as we expect and you've tried to invest on City players because you think they might double, and then, you know, the City Bournemouth fixture doesn't go as we expect. I think in most cases I just try and forget about them for at least until game week 30, or we've had international breaks, the next round of FA Cup fixtures. I wouldn't wildcard this week. And I certainly wouldn't triple captain. I think there's some people talking about triple captain in Salah, and I just wouldn't. I think always go for a double game week if you can. If we can't, then I think just save it to the end of the season. I think Salah at Southampton is obviously, or Salah with Southampton at home is obviously a good fixture, but I'm just not sure how Liverpool will approach that game. And we'll talk about captaincy in a minute, but I would wait on that if you can. Injuries, obviously, a lot of people have got injuries this week, or suspensions. Mateta being the main one, he's probably going to be out for a couple of weeks. I think with injuries like that, what usually tends to happen is they'll err on the side of caution. It's not that he couldn't play. I think he's obviously had stitches to his ear, so he's not actually sustained like a really bad like concussion or a head injury. But I think I'd probably err on the side of the caution. And I know they've got a great fixture outside of on the other side of Gameweek 29, but I think he's a sell. Unfortunately, Cunha is 100% a sell. And Lewis Hall is also out for the season, so he is also a sell, unfortunately. I just wanted to touch on team value because a lot of people will be looking to take some of these players out, especially like players like Isak, because we don't know what's going on with him as well. And I think my advice here would just be to be careful with your transfers. There's a lot of players that we've got a lot of money tied up in, and basically what this means is when you're going to get around to that wild card, whenever that may be, whether it's game week 31 or 34, and everyone's buying Haaland, maybe Foden's in good form, maybe you want Foden, maybe Palmer's looking good again, maybe Saka's back in the team for Arsenal, you're going to want as much money as possible to put together these wild card squads. So things change really quick in football and in FPL. So I would be looking to save as much money as we can. And if you're selling Isak and you bought Isak back in pre-Christmas times, or Salah and you've had Salah for most of the season, you're going to probably lose over £1 million total on those two sells. So for me, I just think keep that in mind. If you can navigate the next couple of weeks, I don't think this is going to be the season defining couple of game weeks. I think that will be 30 plus. So just try and sort of stay alive a bit in these next couple of weeks and then move on after that. And you'll have a better team because of it, I think. Teams to target. I think obviously we can look at fixtures, we can look at form. I think for the next few weeks, if we're looking at teams to target, I think Bournemouth are right up there for me. I just think they've got the most consistent string of fixtures. And they're also in pretty decent form. Wolves is a team who I think you could say they have a little bit of form, but to me that's just all based on Cunha. Like he's their absolute talisman, and without him I just don't see them doing much. So like that's a case of I just wouldn't invest in them. Like they're a team that's in a relegation fight, right? Like if Ipswich manage to get a win in the next couple of weeks and Wolves lose their next couple, Wolves are going to be pulled back down into that straight away. They're only a few points clear of that. And I just wonder how that pressure will affect them, especially with their main man gone. So I'm not sure I'd go for Ait-Nouri. I'm not sure I'd go for Strand Larsen. Like if you need a punt, obviously if they play Southampton in 29 and that's a good fixture. But I'm just not sure. These guys are at the bottom of the table. Are they going to roll Southampton over like everyone else is doing? I'm not so convinced. They're not at home, they're away. So I think I'd just be cautious about going for them. Obviously, there's a couple of other teams with good fixtures, Liverpool and Palace, but they both blank. So again, you don't really want to be investing too heavily there. And then Chelsea, we've obviously got a really good fixture ourselves, but we go straight into Arsenal after that. So there aren't too many teams who I'd be looking at to invest heavily in, who've got like a great run of fixtures. City will play Brighton in 29 and they'll play Leicester after, but City's a tough one in terms of their forwards and who's going to play, and we'll come on to that very shortly. So moving on to the next topic, and that is captaincy, and I think for a lot of people this one will be quite easy. I think a lot of people will go Salah because it's a safe bet, and especially after Cole Palmer's disappointing performance last week. And obviously me being a Chelsea fan, I feel like Palmer is. I feel like he's one of those players we haven't really seen him have a drop off since he's been to Chelsea. He's been ridiculously consistent throughout. So I was surprised that he's missing the sort of chances that he's missing, because he's usually just so ice cold in every situation. Like he is, like nothing phases him, and he did have those opportunities. I think for me, if I was betting on it, I actually think he will return over Salah. I think he will get more points this week. I think he'll play the whole game. I think Maresca will give him the minutes he needs to get back up to scratch. We're also playing tonight against Copenhagen, so that will be a sort of test for him. Like, can he regain some form in that? If he scores and looks good in that, I think that just boosts him even further. All he needs is one goal to just get a bit of confidence back. And then playing one of the worst teams in the league at home, still putting up good numbers, obviously on pens, and a massive differential. He's going to be a huge differential. So I'm tempted to go there. I don't know if it's worth it, to be honest. I think Salah is just the obvious one, because if you don't go there and he gets a hat trick, it's going to kill you. And I just think it'll be such a season ender for no real reason. I think if I was looking at it in terms of like the team matchups as well, I think Leicester are a slightly better team than Southampton. They're not sort of getting trounced quite as much as Southampton are. Like teams just aren't just rolling up and putting like 4 or 5 past them every single week. And I think Anfield is obviously a lot harder place to go to at the moment than Stamford Bridge. Obviously, Liverpool have just come off the back of a pretty intense Champions League match. So I don't know if that will have an effect on them. Obviously, they managed to grind out a win, but you expect them to just come in and roll over Southampton, to be honest. And obviously Chelsea, they probably will rotate a bit, but we can't rotate as much as we used to. We've lost a bit of our squad depth, so that could have an effect on us, and we haven't been in great form. So I wouldn't be that confident in us as a team. I think we'll win, but I don't know if it will be another 4-0. Palmer has a ridiculously high ceiling. He could easily just take over this game, score a hat-trick. It wouldn't surprise me. But I think for this week, I'm going to have to say just stick on Salah for your own sanity. I don't usually like making decisions like that in FPL, but I think that's where I'll go. And I think that's probably where most people should go. So moving on to just some forwards to consider. And this is kind of for the next few weeks, sort of in the lead up to game week 31 and perhaps even further, depending on when you might wildcard. And these are just some of the players that are being talked about, are being transferred in, and some that I quite like as well. And this isn't in order, but I would say my favourite on this list, if you're looking for a forward this week, and for blank game week 29, is Visser. He's a player that's been on my radar for quite a while. I would have brought him in a while ago, but I think he was either injured or just sort of slightly out of form, and I just thought I'd take the safer punt on Chris Wood, and that actually proved that to be a really good idea. But I think he's a really good option now. I know that their fixtures aren't great on paper. Villa at home, I think then Bournemouth away, but I just think he's so consistent. Like when you watch him play, like he just looks really confident. He's a main man for Brentford. You know, he's their focal point. He's in great form. I think he's actually been unlucky when I've watched him on a few occasions to not get more, and I think he's probably got a haul coming. I think at home to Villa could probably be that. I said in my other video, I see this being like a 2-2, 3-2. And I think he could be the one who returns big with a couple of goals. Villa are always a bit shakier after a Champions League game week. Brentford have obviously had a bit more rest. And he just has really good numbers in general. Passes the eye test, has good numbers. and he's just a safe bet. If you want a striker for 3 weeks who's pretty cheap, I would go with him. He would be my number one pick. The other picks are a little bit more interesting. I think, obviously, Chris Wood, we all know what he's capable of. He's a safe pick. I don't love him for the next couple of weeks. I've got him in my team, but that's just because I've had him in my team for quite a while. And he's just a steady pair of hands throughout sort of tricky times. He doesn't get that many opportunities. Obviously, he takes them when he does. I actually almost think that City at home is a better fixture for him because I just think he'll get a bit more space. Obviously, Ipswich is a good fixture, but they've just played Ipswich in the Cup. It was a pretty close game, even though they did rotate a bit. Will they go away to Ipswich and batter them? I'm not so sure. I think Ipswich are a bit better even than Leicester and Southampton. I think they're slightly more compact defensively. And I'm not sure Forest are the sort of... I know they beat Brighton, was it 7-0, but I think that was one of those fluke results. I don't see that happening again. I think Wood is a good pick for the next couple of weeks, and you know what you're going to get from him. If he scores 1 goal, he's a bonus point magnet. He literally always gets 9. He always gets 3 bonus. I don't know how, but he always does. So you can't go wrong there. But probably wouldn't be my favourite pick. Strand Larsen I don't like. Again, for all the reasons I spoke about Wolves. I think he's one of those forwards. He benefits a lot from Cunha being on the pitch. That sort of dynamic that they have between each other, where he's your sort of target man and Cunha's a sort of creative, sort of drops back into the 10 role a little bit more. So I just don't like the look. I'm not sure. I don't know what Wolves will look like without Cunha. So I probably would stay clear of him. I know he's cheap, but there's other cheap strikers that are better. Beto being one of them. I think Beto is better than Strand Larsen. He's playing for a better team right now. He's also I think he's like 0.2 cheaper. And fixtures are similar, I think, for the next 2 weeks. So I like Beto as if you need a really cheap option. I think he is probably the best option in terms of that lower bracket, because also what you can then do is you can bench him the week after really easily. I think they run into Liverpool at home, or Liverpool away. So Liverpool away. So you can bench him and not going to have too much of a headache there. Marmoush, I kind of want to see the Forest game to make my opinion on him. I think he is a really good player. But I almost want one more week of data. Like, will he start again? Will Pep play him? How many minutes will he get? How is he going to deal with the Foden situation? Because Foden got dropped for their last game. Will Foden now come back in? How will they both play together? But I really like his chances at returning. I think when he's on the pitch, he's got a really high chance of returning, and City will only get better now. But again, I wouldn't buy him this week. I just wouldn't, especially if you're thinking about Haaland. I'd just wait for another week of information on him. Evan Nilsson, again, I think is the same. I really like the Evan Nilsson pick. I just think he's cheap, plays for a good team. I think he used to be on pens before he got injured, but I'm not sure. Maybe Clivert stays on them. But if he plays against Tottenham and gets good minutes, I quite like him. I think he's just a cheap pick, and you know, he is their main man. He's the big money signing, and I think he plays in their good fixtures. So if you need a forward again, a cheap forward, he's probably got better chances that are returning than the other guys mentioned so far, I think. And the other one is obviously Haaland, and Haaland is an interesting one because I think if you're buying him for game week 30. Game week 30 is Leicester at home. That is the type of fixture in recent years where whenever City have come up against a newly promoted team at home, it's been demolition, and Haaland scored a hat-trick. And I think this year is probably the only outlier for that because City have struggled. But I think given the moment in the season that we're at, Leicester are looking likely to go down. City are gaining a little bit of confidence again, starting to play a bit better. Haaland's in a bit better form. It's very difficult to go into that fixture without having Erling Haaland. I think because he's going to be the most popular captain as well. I think Salah has Everton at home, which isn't a bad fixture, but it's a tough fixture, as we saw earlier in the season. And I think Haaland will be the favourite. And I just worry about going into a fixture like that in the FPL season. You know, they don't come around too often. So I spoke about in my last video about not getting Haaland, and I think the sentiment still remains that for 29 he's not needed. But for 30, it's tough to go without. You have to be brave to go without him. And I'm certainly still looking at ways to get him in my team, so I can have him for that game week 30, because he always plays as well. Like, for ages, for years gone by, like with Pep, we'd never know who he's going to play, right? Like, you get the Pep roulette. Even when he had like Aguero and stuff like that, it wasn't 100%. But Haaland is one of the first names on the team sheet, if not the first. So I think he's just, even though he's really expensive, and I wouldn't be that high on owning him in general because of his price and his route to points, I think for that week alone, he's a really good pick. And if you can work out a way of maybe selling Palmer, maybe selling Cunha or Mateta or Trent, and getting him in with a cheaper midfielder, a cheaper defender, I don't think you can go wrong there. So finally, moving on to just a couple of differential picks for the week. And it's just a bit of fun, really. I'm not necessarily saying you should go here, but if you're on free hit 29, why not? If you've got a spare transfer, I really like a couple of these. We'll talk about Nkunku first, because I'm obviously a Chelsea fan. I don't necessarily think that Nkunku is the greatest pick going forward. I don't necessarily think that he will continue to play and continue to return, but when he plays against the lower opposition in the Europa games, and obviously as we've seen in the last game, he just tends to get involved. And for a 1 week punt, being as cheap as he is, I think he's like 5.7. I don't think you can get much better. I'd go him over Neto for the pure factor that he's cheap. And I think we have potentially more options to replace Neto if he wanted to come off. George could play for him. And I just think for this week, especially given the fact that Jackson could be back soon, he's going to want to play Nkunku as much as possible. He's my preferred option. So, if you've got a Gordon that needs taking out and you were going to free hit him out in 29 so you can have him back for 30, then Nkunku could be a good choice for that now because he's injured. So I don't mind him if you want to get some more Chelsea coverage. Diaz, I think this is the best fixture really that we have all year. It would either be Liverpool, Southampton, City, Southampton, or Arsenal really. Arsenal with their full strength team. And I think usually what tends to happen in these fixtures with these bigger teams is it won't always be the main man that does really well. Like we've seen it in years gone by where Salah is a big game player. He has stepped up for Liverpool where they need him most this season. And in these types of games where the pressure isn't necessarily there as much to, get that all-important goal, you expect them to win fairly handedly. I think we could see other players shine. And with Liverpool, it's difficult because you don't know who will play in terms of their forwards. Darwin Núñez, maybe he probably starts. Does Jota start? He started midweek, so maybe Núñez starts now. Gakpo wasn't in the squad for the UCL game, so I don't think Gakpo starts against Southampton. I'd be surprised if he makes. He'll probably make the bench. We'll have to wait to hear what Slot says, but I think Diaz is a really good punt. I think he could end up returning big with maybe a goal and assist, something like that. And I expect him to start. So, again, he's got high ownership, but that ownership is probably just people that put him in at the start of the game and left him. His effective ownership is probably really low. I don't think a lot of people have gone for him. And if he returns well, he will get you good rank gain. So I think he's my favourite out of the Liverpool assets. I also like Szoboszlai because he will play and he's been taking up more advanced roles, but wouldn't go for Jota, wouldn't go for Núñez. I think that's probably it really, isn't it? And then my other one is Eze. I really like Eze for this week, almost even more so now that Mateta is out. Not because that's a good thing for Palace, it's not. But I expect Palace to beat Ipswich. I don't think Ipswich are very good. Palace are in really good form. They've had a bit more of a rest since the FA Cup than Ipswich have. Ipswich have had an extra time game against Forest. And Eze's kind of just been nicely ticking along. Like if you look at his returns, he's had a few assists here and there. Obviously he had his injury, now he's getting back to full fitness. He's had a couple of 90 minutes. And this guy can shoot. Like he can shoot from the edge of the box. He can take free kicks. And I think he has a haul coming. And I think this could be the fixture. Again, pretty low ownership. And a really good fixture on the other side of 29. So if you're free hitting, I struggle to think of a better player to bring in than Eze with Ipswich at home. And then I believe it's Southampton or Leicester straight after the blank. So yeah, I really like him. But yeah, that's going to be pretty much everything for today's video. If you guys have any questions or anything you want to see before the deadline, please do let me know. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoy the content. I massively appreciate it. And if there's any suggestions that you guys have to improve the videos, then please do let me know. I will endeavour to improve the quality in terms of the graphics and the mic and stuff like that. So yeah, thanks guys for watching, and I will see you on the next one.